I'm sure mean a lot to my father. Before I bring Greg up to the stage, I wanted to clarify a little bit about the way we're dressed. To say that my father worried about how we dressed, that's an understatement. One of the most challenging tasks my mother had was trying to get him into a tie. He'd happily go out to dinner in a ragged old pair of shorts, Crocs with socks, and any one of his hundreds of beloved U.S. polos. So in honor of his unique sense of style, you'll find his family wearing a fraction, just a fraction, of his U.S. attire, as this is about as dressed up as he'd want to be. So without any further ado, Greg.
Hello, my name's Greg Kanzinger. I am Frank Kanzinger's youngest son. You just met my brother, Bill. So here we go. So 45 years ago today, my grandfather and grandmother, Millard and Jean Kanzinger, brought forth into this world Franklin William Kanzinger. I thought my dad, being a big fan of Lincoln, would appreciate that opening. My dad was a physical education teacher and a coach, and one of the things he was known for was breaking down an action into its smaller parts or principles, and then teaching the smaller parts. So I want to try and break my dad down into the principles that drove him. So here are the 4 principles of Frank Kanzinger. Principle 1, take pride. My dad took great pride in his family and the work he did. He loved his family and enjoyed putting the Kanzinger name on the back of shirts or any article of clothing. He always tried to collect the letters from different knickknacks that spelled Kanzinger. You could see this hobby throughout his house and barn. He loved it when the Kanzinger name was in the paper or honored with some award. And he was most proud, though, that his grandkids, sons, and their wives were all kind and considerate people. Ironically, my dad was not proud of his first name. My dad's oldest brothers and sister were given family names, while my dad was named after his dad's boss. A boss that my dad's dad didn't even like. To this day, his brothers and sisters call him Kank, a name given to him when his brother Don cannot pronounce his name, Frank. My dad did take pride in his initials, FWK, and gave my brother these initials. Unfortunately, since first names are not important to my dad, he did not give my brother an actual first name. He just used the letter F. My brother is F. William Kanzinger. In addition, I go by Greg, even though my first name is Charles. This has led to my brother and I always knowing when a telemarketer or someone we didn't know was trying to call us. I was lucky enough to go to school here and was able to have my dad as a teacher and a coach from kindergarten through 8th grade. My dad often motivated students by appealing to their self-esteem and dignity. He believed he owed it to the team to show up and be ready to play, even when sick. He would get most angry at students and teams that did not take pride in how they performed. Principles 2 and 3. Be modest and demonstrate competency. Or, talk is cheap, but showing off is okay. These two principles were at the heart of many of my dad's actions. These two principles kind of go against each other in that one is saying to be humble while the other encourages you to seek praise. When I went to school here, my dad never really got mad at me. Part of this was because I for the most part behaved myself, but also because he did not want to embarrass me at school. The maddest he ever got at me for something I did at school occurred when I was in the 1st grade. We were doing the high jump in gym class, and the previous summer, I won the high jump in my day camp group. I thought I was pretty hot stuff. But in gym class, I did not have a good day, and did worse than I expected. After my last jump, which I missed, I got off the high jump pit and exclaimed, I was not trying. That evening, my dad had a track meet or something and did not get home until I was in bed. Anyway, he came up to my room and used his outside voice. For those of you who ever had him as a coach and teacher, remember him getting mad and know what this sounds like. He yelled something about how I should never do that again and how embarrassed he was about my behavior. To be honest, I don't really know what he said, but I knew I should never say I was not trying again. When my dad first met my mom at Silver Bay in Lake George, New York, he had taken my mom out for a date and then arranged for a friend to take them out on Lake George in a motorboat. For those of you who don't know, my dad grew up in Philadelphia, and his family had a place on the Schuylkill River where my dad would water ski practically every day during the summer. His family used to take part in the water ski shows on the river, and my dad would often play the clown in the show. When my dad's friend asked if anyone knew how to water ski, my dad claimed not to know how to water ski. He then got in the water and decided that now would be a good time to do his clown act for my mom. So he started on 2 skis and he could barely get up, pretended to lose his balance all over the place, could barely stay on his feet until eventually 1 ski fell off. And then somehow he managed to keep his balance on 1 ski. By the end, he was zipping back and forth behind the boat on 1 ski like an expert. We still don't know, but somehow my mom still married him. My dad, being a coach, would often hear from students or parents about how good their son was at such and such. They would talk about how they played club soccer, or how they made the all-star team, or how many goals they scored. Part of what made my dad a good coach was that he never paid much attention to this. He only cared about how they played on his field. My dad often preferred hard-nosed players over more skilled players and could cause controversy with his decisions. He always stuck to his beliefs, in my opinion, earned the respect of the players who played for him. His teams won accordingly. Part of the reason my dad was a hard worker was these 2 principles worked together to motivate him. My dad loved to get praise, but he would never seek it. This meant in order to get the praise he loved, he would need to work for it. Nothing would motivate my dad more than someone telling him that a task was impossible. He loved to work on these impossible tasks because he knew he would get that wow reaction he loved if he accomplished it. The best example of this can be seen with his pond. My dad put in a 3/4 acre pond and lined this whole interior and exterior with rock walls that he built himself. He would get these rocks 1 ton at a time by loading his pickup truck from the oversized rocks at T Gravel in Newberry. He would then move them into place manually using wheelbarrows and his own strength. I'd be willing to bet my dad moved over 250 tons of rocks this way, and the end result was a pretty impressive set of rock walls. When he was done, the contractor who built the pond came back to look at it and told my dad that a lot of people talk about what they're going to do to their pond. You're only a few people who actually did it. I believe my dad thought this was one of the best compliments he ever got in his life. In addition, when someone saw the pond for the first time, they would inevitably ask about the rock walls, and my dad would then get to tell the story of how he built them. This is to deliver the wow reaction he was looking for. Again, you can kind of see this pattern throughout his life. Final principle: celebrate achievement. My dad believed in celebrating achievements in all forms. This could be from winning a soccer game or a card game, solving a crossword puzzle, or getting a good deal at a garage sale. In order to know when a great achievement happened, my dad organized collections of things he bought and kept stats on the sporting events he coached. My dad had many different types of collections and was constantly starting new ones. One of the main reasons for this was because the collection helped him understand when he was getting a good deal on something, or when he found something unique. In addition to the good deal, there was the accomplishment of finding a new item for the collection and a story you could tell when he found it and what he paid for it. At one point, my daughters and dad listed all of his collections, and they numbered over 80. For athletic achievements, my dad would let his students know when they did something special. Whether you scored more goals than anyone else or did a backflip off the high dive for the first time but overcoming your fear, my dad would let you know how that accomplishment compared to students before. He would say something like, "I could count the number of people in one hand who did that." This motivated students to try out different types of tasks and allowed my dad to coach and teach students of all different skill levels and talents. You could be climbing a rope and suddenly find out you're only one of 5 students in history to hold the rope between your feet the way you did. All of these traits would come together when he was coaching. Most of the teams he coached would have a story like the one that happened when I was in 7th grade playing on the 7th and 8th grade soccer team. We traveled to Old Trail, normally a pretty easy win for US teams, and lost. Old Trail had one of those 8th graders on their team who was already built like a grown man, and this player kind of dominated the game. The good news, though, was that we were going to get to play them again, and nothing motivated my dad more than to get the chance to get even. After the game, my dad took the time to praise this great player from Old Trail and talk about what this player was good at and what we would need to do next time to stop him. He would then go through each player on our team and talk about the things we did well, but also the things that we needed to do better to win next time. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will work on these things slowly building up to when we played them again. Finally, the week of the game came, and my dad presented a strategy for how we were going to win. He decided we needed more offense and decided to move certain players forward, but also devised a strategy about how we were going to stop this one great player. Part of this was having one of our players guard this player all over the field. As a team, we knew this was not an ordinary game anymore. We needed to take pride in this performance and count on one another if we were going to succeed. We ended up kicking the holy crap out of Old Trail. We beat them 5-0. I remember our teammates talking about this game for years afterwards, reminiscing about how we all came together for a common goal and played our best together. I also recall players and other teams my dad coached having similar stories. It's been a few weeks now since my dad passed away. I still miss him every day. I find myself missing him when an event happens in my life when I would normally reach out to him. It could be when I see a sign for a garage sale, or I want his opinion on how to fix something, or ask him if he knows where something is in his barn. I know I'm going to miss watching my mom and dad interact, and how their strengths and weaknesses complement each other so well. Growing up in a family of teachers, I often marvel how much teachers are cheerleaders for their students. I am impressed by how happy teachers become when their students succeed. I think this is what I'm going to miss most about my dad. I'm going to miss him rooting for my success. I feel like I'm hustling his parent. Love you, Dad.
Before I get started, what I've written here is about half of what I could have written, and it's hard to, there's so many great stories about Frank, and I look forward to sharing some of them with you afterwards, maybe in a more informal environment. The outfit I'm wearing is Bill pointed out, I call it Frank Formal. In the U.S., there are just some assemblies you have to wear a coat, and this is what he would do. This is how I got around it. And this shirt in particular, which is Ron Grant era, 93, I think, was one I feel like Frank always wore, but probably because Kim would wash it and put it back at the top and it'd be back in. It was tough to choose between that and but like any U.S. teacher who's been here a long time, you have a closet full of these, because this is your payment for coaching. And there's something about that at least in the old days was an honor, a good thing. So I will begin now, sorry. Greg, well done. My name is Bill Chier, and I attended university school starting in approximately 1973 and graduated in 1985. In an interesting twist of events, I returned in 1993, and 30 years later, I'm still here. Given I had a 9-year older brother, it's okay. Mine will probably go up. Given I had a 9-year older brother, I have told many lately, I basically was born here. It's humbling and a bit overwhelming to reflect on the life of a man who I've known so many years and who has such an impact on me both subtly and at times more overtly. As I contemplated what to say these last few weeks, I realized the only way to do it is exactly the way Frank would have done it. Direct and don't hold back. If you look closely at his numbers here at US, my time here loosely mirrors an interesting, uniquely outgoing, motivating and motivated, funny, athletic, and uniquely booming-voiced man named Frank Kanzinger. Chump Chump was the nickname he gave me as an 8th grade soccer player. Well, I don't know. I guess Champ became Chump, and then why not do two of them? But he said to me on the first day I was hired to teach 6th grade English and science, "Hey, Chump Chump, welcome back. Do you play poker?" I knew my ride as a new teacher at US was going to be an interesting one. We played cards every first Friday of the month for easily 10 years, and it was one of my favorite traditions, playing with all my old teachers. I wanted to stop and say something that has hit me as I reflected on Frank and many teachers I had. I think people in this room will understand this comment. They were characters, and they were old school. And quite honestly, much of who they were then would not fly in today's school world. Many of you in the audience today know what I mean. I'm saying this not as a criticism. I just found, as I reflected on what to say today, how different things once were. Don't get me wrong. Frank Kanzinger was a devout family man, a terrific father, committed to children in remarkable ways. He did not drink a drop of alcohol, and many of you know him have heard this line. I have fit as much alcohol I've had in my life in a thimble with a little finger. And yet he was an amazingly committed teacher and coach, and yet to say many of the stories I have in my head, there's just some I can't tell you right now. From a very early age, I was walking around US, and I remember the family of brightly blonde people. A mother, father, and 2 high-energy boys running around the school. I quickly learned they were the Kanzingers. Similarly, I knew a group of men who seemed ubiquitous throughout the school. Like many young boys, field, or what we call at US gym class, was my favorite class, and these 4 men were everywhere. One who had a piercing natural whistle, who always dressed as a clown on Halloween. That was Ron. Another who made me laugh and connected well in every way, and that was George. But mostly I enjoyed dunking him in the dunk tank that the annual carnival in the gym was run by the athletic department. Now that I know how valuable weekend time is to my current colleagues, I'm amazed you all did this. And then, of course, there was the Pepsi-drinking Dave Sterrett, who told me that my brother should have been the quarterback instead of playing in that other sport, soccer. They were legends, and if you didn't know them, you missed a part of the golden age of university school. I know today is about Frank, and I don't think it's fair to talk about Frank without talking about the men he worked with and the team they formed. My classmates and I, especially upon hearing of Frank's passing, talked about them as if they were one. Inevitably, someone has a funny story about Sterrett, Kanzinger, Richards, or Grant. I'm not sure if any of today's speakers will address this, but my guess is Frank himself would say that everything he accomplished as a teacher at least was partially inspired by his peers and their influence of that unique foursome that so many of us were so fortunate to have had as teachers, or in my case, teachers and colleagues. As all middle schoolers do, they move on to the rigors and demands of high school. But as so many of my students have sometimes told me, it's the awkwardness and demands of middle school that lead to who we become as young men. We have to get out of it. But unlike many of my peers, I got to return to the middle school for our senior project experience. And a few of us were assistant teachers in the Shaker Athletic Department. And I always wonder if it had something to do with me ultimately choosing education. I mention this because one of my earliest memories as a, quote, budding young teacher was watching Frank teach and listening to him tell stories and seamlessly blend his personality, his energy, and the fun into his job, which really appeared to me not to be work, but as an extension of who he was. How many of us can say about our career that we were lucky because our career was just who we were? To speak of Frank cannot happen without talking about him as a coach. He was my 8th grade soccer coach, and he held that job for 30 years before becoming the B coach for a few years. According to Ron Grant, he was the first middle school soccer coach who started the program. He took 1 year, 1973, off to substitute for the great Don Moulton as the head varsity coach, and he talked about that year until the day he retired. He loved coaching middle school, and he loved coaching high school kids. And as Bill said to me the other day, Bill, maybe it was Greg, I'm not sure, but they both would say this. He just wanted to make kids better, and he believed every kid was capable of getting better. Frank was a true old school U.S. teacher, and like many of us who did just what it took to get it done. He coached the track team for years in the middle school, but he also was an assistant coach on the high school, coaching pole vault. He coached swimming for years. He worked with the gym team as long as the famous gym show existed. And as a soccer coach, he won well over 300 games. But what many of us knew about Frank, and that I want to share with you, is that Frank could tell you which boy scored every goal in every game he coached, what the score was, and who they played. I know because I was his assistant coach, and ultimately he gave me his job. It's a post I'm actually incredibly proud of, because when I talk to my friends, and they ask, what do you do, champ? I say, well, basically I'm Frank Kanzinger. And then they get it. I received a note a few days ago from Andy Sikorowski stating simply that he was the best soccer coach I ever had. Another text said, Coach Kanzinger was inspiring and encouraging coach as I've ever had. Another said he had unbridled enthusiasm, and whether it was soccer, practice, or gym class, it was always fun. And then finally another guy wrote, that dude was fast. Personally, I knew him as an incredible athlete. His athletic ability was an inspiration. I saw him barefoot water ski, which is ironic to hear Greg's story about his early days. I've seen him walk on his hands upside down across the gym, and I said that to Bill the other day. He said, I could do that too, when he walked across. All the other guys are incredible athletes. And as I heard from a peer, I would say that dude was fast. He set the tone. He was a role model. Chris Barton shared with me a funny story last week about describing a year where he was Frank's assistant coach, and Frank was very upset with the refs in the game, and he lost his school against the arch nemesis Hudson School. At one point, the ref asked Frank to kindly leave the field. In other words, he kicked him out. Frank handed Chris the clipboard and said, you got this. Chris told me it was through sheer dumb luck because I forgot to substitute and probably put the kids in the wrong positions when I did. We somehow scored the winning goal. And at that point, he looked down, if you know the Shaker Fields, off by the football field bleachers, and there was Frank jumping up and down, hooting and hollering and cheering for the win. Chris said it was his fondest memory as a coach. I'm not sure I could do it justice, but at the end of practice, Frank would always play in the scrimmages, and we loved it because we wanted to try and beat the great Coach Kanzinger. If he would get the ball, he would dribble down the field, and he would do this cackle, and he would say, hee, I got you, and nobody could get the ball from him. But if we did, it was like we won the World Cup. Even as an older man, Frank was always pushing himself. He always talked about for his 50th birthday, he wanted to run a 5-minute mile. And of course he did. Frank was a man about statistics and data, and he was driven. Most of you know that the personality that he personally found and carried thousands of boulders. I won't retell the story that Greg has told. But one of his greatest feats I observed from him was to watch him pursue the goal of teaching students what a million looked like. And those of you who are around know what I'm talking about. At first I remember seeing these pop can tops all around the gym on a cable. It wrapped the gym 2 or 3 times. And that was his first attempt. And I guess Kim just told me recently he never quite made $1 million with that. But that was not good enough. So he began what was a many-year quest to raise 1 million pennies. At first, he had someone build a giant cylinder that was about 10 feet tall. It kind of looked like a graduated cylinder, and it was clear. He then started raising money. He took donations. He sold Kim's famous chocolate brownies. He sold crap out of the barn from the Kanzinger's house to the 6th graders. We did penny wars, and we did just about everything we could do to make that money and raise it. The giant cylinder would slowly fill, and after years, and I'm not kidding, it eventually hit the mark. It held 1 million pennies, and it was incredible to see. I had never seen 1 million of something, and it was impressive. Like stacking an acre of rocks, it took a special commitment to do this. True to form, after it sat as a display for a few years, he took all the pennies back to the bank and donated them to charity. Curious, Jenny, you know how many 1 million pennies is? Any math teachers? $10,000. That's a lot of pennies. I was speaking with Kim this last week, and she said, sadly, hauling those pennies back to the bank in the bags, climbing out of that cylinder on weekends, actually wrecked his back. Knowing Frank, I'm surprised he didn't calculate how much a million pennies actually weigh. I can go on and on, but I know I'm getting a little long-winded. I hope my message is clear. He was a committed teacher and coach. He and his peers were my mentors, and I have tried in my 30 years to bring some of the same commitment and energy to university school. These men simply did what was needed. And despite Frank's admission, and women, not just men, to me, because in those days there were a lot of teachers who were here as long as I was. And despite Frank's admission to me, he started at 69, Frank admitted to me that he started in 1970 at $6,900 a year in salary. But ironically, you would have thought he was making $1 million. I want to close with two stories. And one of my favorites is when Frank retired, we said to him, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Oh, I've got it all figured out. I'm just going to work on my projects. And when I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. And then when I'm awake, I'm going to keep going. I will follow my chores. I won't pay attention to bedtime. In short, I will sleep when I want, eat when I want, and work when I want." A few weeks later, I saw him and I said, "How's it going, Frank?" He said, "Well, within a few weeks, I was up all night and I slept all day." And Kim said, "No more." The second story is that Frank was always most proud of his family. He couldn't stop talking about how proud he was that both he and Kim, a longtime revered teacher at HB, won the Alumni Fellowship Award, both HB's and US's highest honor a teacher can win. And he thought how great it was that they were next to each other in their home. Then he talked about his sons getting married and then his grandchildren and on and on. Frank was always first and foremost a family man. I will close by saying, happy birthday, Frank. You may have been small in stature, but you were a mountain of a man. Your legacy will truly be one of a great educator, coach, dad, and family man, and you will be missed.
Got to start off with something Bill just said. I started here the year before Frank, and I didn't know he started off making $6,900. That's $900 more than I made before. And I think my second year was $6,700. Good, I'm glad to hear that. My name is Ron Grant, and I had the privilege of teaching with Frank for 25 years here at this building before I moved on to the upper school. Frank came to the U.S., as I just mentioned, in the fall of 1970, fresh out of Philadelphia Textile University with a bachelor's degree in business. Without any experience in education courses, he was fortunate to be joining a department with veteran teachers, Don Moulton Sr., Tom Kell, and Don Blanchard. I was in my second year at US, and though I was not a veteran teacher yet, I could tell right away that Frank would become an exceptional teacher of physical education and a successful coach. What stood out most about Frank's teaching skills with kindergarten through 6th grade was his creativity. I taught kindergarten with Frank for several years, and one of my favorite lessons he developed on his own was how to grip a ball to throw. He would show the boys how to first make a fist with your throwing hand. And then he would say, open up your index finger and your big finger, and wow, you've got the mouth of a snake. And at the top of that mouth are 2 fangs. Take those fangs and push them into the ball as hard as you can. And at the same time, put your thumb underneath the ball and hold that ball just tight enough that you won't drop it. And now you're ready to throw. Simple. Very simple explanation, but what a fantastic way to show boys how to throw the ball, and they were very successful at doing it. It was so simple that I even actually explained the same thing to my 8th grade pitchers on how to threat the baseball using Frank's explanation. I'm not sure my 8th grade pitchers had as much success throwing as his kindergarten boys did. Another skill Frank broke down into simple parts was the skill of trapping a soccer ball. He would explain to the boys the secret to trapping a soccer ball was of giving with the body part that you were going to trap the ball with. Again, it sounds simple, But for young boys in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, their first comment to Mr. Kanzinger was, "What is given with the ball?" So he would take his elementary class, and sometimes his 8th grade soccer team, down to the tennis courts. He would make them line up several yards away from the nets. And then he would start kicking ball after ball after ball into the net. If you haven't played tennis and you see a ball hit the net, it stops almost immediately and rolls to the ground inches away from the tennis net. Again, a simple way of breaking down a skill, but the boys learned how to do that skill very easily because of his teaching. As mentioned, Frank was a gifted athlete and was proficient in the sports of soccer, tennis, softball, diving, and track and field events. His knowledge and skills in all the sports and his incredible energy helped make him a successful and likable soccer coach and diving and pole vault coach at the varsity level. He also coached soccer, softball, track and field, swimming, and diving here at the lower school, and also quite a bit of gymnastics. Frank often relied on his physical skills as a teacher, using it as a teaching method, especially when we were coaching our gym team for the annual gym exhibition. One year we had several boys who were trying to learn how to do back handsprings and back flips. And Frank was still here, he probably would show you how you can do that. Dave Starrett, George Richards, Frank and I, we took turns trying to explain how to master these particular difficult skills without much luck. So Frank thought it would be easier for the boys to learn these skills if they could see someone physically demonstrate these two difficult tumbling tricks. So in front of the boys, he asked me to explain the skill for the back handspring and then the back flip. Frank had never attempted these skills before, and in front of the team members, as I described what he needed to do, he threw a back handspring, threw a back flip. Most of the boys will go on to accomplish these skills within a few days under Frank's teaching and certainly his demonstrations. He also used the technique in coaching diving at the varsity level and pole vaulting at the varsity level. Unfortunately, Frank was probably better at pole vaulting and diving than most of the athletes he worked with. He was really an incredible athlete. I was able to visit Frank a few days before he passed away peacefully on June 13th. During my visit, I had the opportunity to reminisce with him about our years together at the Shaker campus. First, I mentioned the time when he invited me to his home city of Philadelphia. Frank, knowing how much I loved baseball, and also realizing that my beloved Indians were awful in the 70s and 80s, and I might never make it to the World Series. So Frank invited me to travel with him to Philadelphia to meet his family and to attend the 4th game of the 1983 World Series when his beloved Phillies played the Orioles. It was a wonderful gesture by a great friend, and I enjoyed meeting his family and seeing some of them again today, and also where he grew up. Also, we both remembered fondly a couple of memories that are etched in the minds of Dave, George, and me. Some of the things I can't tell you about, but every fall we tested boys in grades 5 through 8 in the mile run on the track outside. And there were a number of boys who needed our encouragement to finish the test without walking, which was more important to us than their actual time. But there was one young man who had trouble running the entire mile and was resisting all of our encouragement. So Frank sprinted to this young man who had about 400 yards to go. Frank then started jogging with the student and strongly, by holding his hand, encouraged and coached him all the way to the finish line. There's a little bit more to that story, but as I told that to Frank, we remembered it actually brought a smile to his face and laughed as much as he could. We also revisited the most amazing stunt Frank ever attempted. The Shaker campus gym, if you haven't seen it, the ceiling is about 100 feet high, and it has girders running all through the ceiling in order to keep not only the roof up, but hold the entire facility together. Frank noticed a soccer ball one day that was stuck up in the girders pretty pretty much 50 to 60 feet off of the ground. It really, really annoyed him. So he calmly hoisted himself up on the lowest girder, about 15 feet off the ground, without using a ladder. None of us have any idea how he got up to that first girder. He then scaled from beam to beam by scooting on his bottom and at times crawling on all fours. He miraculously, after several minutes, reached the ball and threw it to the floor. I don't know of anyone else who could have even attempted such a feat or would want to even try to without a safety net or a safety line. Those who witnessed the event will never forget not only how athletic Frank was, but how fearless he was. Also, when I visited Frank and his family, it was an opportunity for me to let Frank know how valuable he was to our department. After a few years of teaching, Frank enrolled at Kent State University to earn his master's in physical education and specifically in movement education. As he progressed through his courses, he would share his knowledge with Dave, George, and me. His mentoring helped shape the direction of our teaching through the exploration of movement and the shared vocabulary that we all learned through him for the teaching of skills. Also, his efforts helped the three of us strengthen our team teaching of grades kindergarten through 6th grade. As I left, I bent down to Frank and told him he was the best teacher of kindergarten through 6th grade in our department and the best teacher I ever observed or had the opportunity to teach with. As I finished sharing the reasons why he was such a brilliant teacher, his son Bill said, "Ron, sounds like Dad was a teacher's teacher." And I can't say that any better than that. Happy birthday, Frank. Love you, and you'll be missed.
Yes, my name is F. Yes, you can call me Bill. And can I just say I love the fact that someone once thought this shirt was a good idea. Apologies if it was one of you. Whether you called him Frank, Kank, Kanky, Mr. Kanzinger, Mr. K, Coach K, Uncle Frank, K-Boy, Franklin, if you're one of those telemarketers, Grandpa, Papa, Honey, or Dad, we are here to honor a unique individual, one who lived life on his terms and left his mark on so many who got to know him as a friend, teacher, colleague, mentor, coach, or relative. As I thought about what I wanted to say today, I asked myself that very cliche question: if you could describe him in one word, what would it be? Many words came to mind, many of which I won't share with you right now, but the word that rose to the top was strong. Now when I say strong, I don't just mean physically. I could go on for days with different stories that highlight how strong he was. For example, when he would teach students how to climb a rope, after showing them the proper technique, he would take one rope in his left hand, the other in his right hand, and he would go up the ropes faster than anybody else could using their arms and legs. He learned to deep water barefoot start when he was in his 40s. A deep water barefoot start is when you start without a ski, and basically you're lying on your back wearing a special suit, and you grab the tow rope and you put the rope in between your feet like this. The boat takes off, and you're literally pulled underwater. As the boat gets fast enough, you kind of plane up out of the water until you're able to sit up and then plant your feet in the water, and then you start barefooting. Now, the boat also has to get up to about 40 miles an hour for you to accomplish this. So, you think about that. How strong you have to be not only to hold on as you're being pulled through the water, but to hold on with that water dragging against your body weight. Now, for those of you who have not reached the age of 40, let me tell you something. Your mind and your body are not on the same page. Your mind will think, I can totally do this, no problem. Your body, on the other hand, is saying, nah, you really shouldn't. Meanwhile, the mind's all, yeah, I got this. And then your body sends up little warning signs by randomly shooting up pains through your legs. But in your 40s, your mind often wins out. And granted, you spend the next morning in bed because you can hardly move, but that's for a regular person. My dad tried the deep water barefoot start over and over, And by the end of that summer, he was able to do it on a consistent basis. And if he felt any pain, he certainly didn't let on. When he was 60, he visited us in Wilmington while the Azalea Festival was going on. And this is like a big street fair, with all kind of booths and stuff and whatnot. But there was a pull-up challenge, daring you to try to do 10 pull-ups. Now, I'm not yet in my 60s, but I am in my 50s. And I can tell you that mind and body are starting to get a little bit closer to being on the same page. The mind will look at a challenge like that and say, oh, I can totally do this, no problem. And the body will say, son, just don't. And the mind will say, yeah, besides those elephant ears look pretty good. And the body will then shoot up some more leg pains just to justify your decision was correct. But needless to say, my dad saw that, and his mind probably said, challenge accepted, and his body was probably like, yeah, whatever, you don't listen to me anyway. And he proceeded to crank out 15 to 20 pull-ups, which is even more impressive when you consider he wasn't exactly the skinniest guy at the age of 60. One last story about his physical strength is the mustard bottle. Back in the day, when yellow mustard squeeze bottles were something new, my dad was trying to put mustard on something. I'm not sure if the bottle was clogged, or more likely he just forgot to unscrew the little cap. But he could not get any mustard to come out. And you could begin to sense the frustration turning to anger the longer he tried. Finally, he just took his two hands together and went, yeah, the mustard bottle exploded. And while I'm sure he had mustard on him, and there's probably mustard on the wall and stuff, my 10-year-old mind likes to picture him completely yellow, and the wall completely yellow, except for the silhouette behind him, where his body had his torso blocked all the mustard. He grabbed that mustard bottle, went outside, and he chucked that thing as far into the woods as he could. So yeah, he had a bit of a strong temper as well. Oh, side note, he found that mustard bottle a few years later and he chucked it even deeper. So yeah, not just pound for pound the strongest person I knew, but straight up the strongest person I knew. But beyond strength, he also had strong convictions. I mean, if you're going to dig a hole in your property, dig a hole. Yeah, and then surround that hole with tens of thousands of rocks. And why pay someone to deliver them when you can go get them yourselves, even if it means blowing out the engine to your truck? Twice. And if you have a giant Civil War era barn with all that storage space, why leave it empty? Fill it with everything. And once you've collected everything, get multiples of everything. I mean, what's one broken chainsaw when you can have 7? And forget making a house out of Lincoln logs, make a whole town. And if the Lincoln logs aren't big enough, make your own crazy long Lincoln logs. You know, it's funny though, as I was going through the basement of my parents' house with my mom a few weeks ago, and she looked at his collection of tools and wondered aloud why one person would need literally 100 Phillips head screwdrivers. It got me thinking about that. And while I do think he liked to collect things, I think part of the reason why is he strongly believed in the potential of those things. Given time, those broken chainsaws, they'd work again. And those thousands of used golf balls could be repurposed into works of art. And he saw that same potential in each one of us to be the best versions of ourselves. It's what made him such a great teacher, as well as a great father, grandfather, uncle, or friend. He would do anything he could to help you reach your full potential. I could go on about my dad's strength. He had a strong personality that could take over a room. My children would tell you about his never-ending search for the Philly cheesesteak outside of Philadelphia, and how he went behind the counter at a Jersey Mike's in Wilmington and schooled some 18-year-old kid on how to properly make a cheesesteak. I could tell you about my freshman year in high school, where he was riding a referee who was making terrible calls, to the point where the referee called him out and asked him if he would like to referee the game. My dad said yes. Started marching down the field to take that referee's whistle from him. He got tossed. And he had strong beliefs in how things should be done. Just ask any administrator who got between him and what he wanted to accomplish. In the end, my dad still had one more lesson to teach me about strength. As friends, family, and colleagues came to say their last goodbyes, many asked how I was doing. When I gave the standard reply of doing the best that I can, it got me to thinking about dark times in people's lives, which leads to another age-old question: why do bad things happen to good people? As his body continued to fail him, he never asked, why me? As he was poked and prodded and flipped and observed by doctors and nurses, he would tell each one of them, thank you. And as I watched my dad greet his visitors, he would tell each one of them that he loved them. It was then that I came to realize that it's easy to be strong when times are good, but when times are tough, that's when you can show the world who you really are. You can shine through that darkness and show yourself and others your greatness. You can cry when you need to cry. You can laugh when you need to laugh. And maybe even throw a mustard bottle or two. But at the end of the day, you still need to be able to look yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you are. So Dad, as I walk out of these doors, my promise to you is I will continue to strive to be the best person I can be, even in the dark times.
I just consider myself one of the luckiest guys on earth to have the family I have. Of mine now being 69 years old, I realize I'm not saying my best years are behind me, but most of my years are behind me. And so I appreciate every moment I've got. I appreciate every moment of health I've got. There are a lot of people that don't appreciate their health until they don't have it. And then they say, oh, I wish. And, one of the things I wanted to be, one of the goals of mine was to be, when I was 60, was to be able to retire and be healthy. Well, I retired at 60 and I was healthy, and I've been healthy for 10 years, and I'm just knocking on wood. Every day, every week, every month, every year is a blessing.
When the hour is upon us and our beauty is surely gone, no, you will not be forgotten, and you will not be alone. No, you will not be alone. And when the day has all but ended, and our echo starts to fade, no, you will not be alone then, and you will not be afraid. No, you will not be afraid. upon us, and our beauty is surely gone. No, you will not be forgotten, and you will not be alone. No, you will not be alone. Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stand if I saw you in heaven? I'll find my way through night and day, 'cause I know I just can't stay here in heaven. Time can bring you down, time can bend your knees. Time can break your heart, have you begging please, begging please. Beyond the door, there's peace, I'm sure, and I know there'll be no more tears in heaven.
time, I'm going to invite the family to go ahead and excuse themselves and head over to the Commons, which, for those of you like me who worked here a long time ago, it's the old cafeteria. There's not going to be any kind of formal receiving line or anything like that. We'll all sort of be there, be around to say hello and share stories.